again, friends. This is Pastor George Nicholas. I have the honor and privilege of being the Chief Executive Officer for the Buffalo Center for Health Equity and Chair of the African American Health Equity Task Force. And, it's our mission at Buffalo Center for Health Equity to eliminate race-based health disparities in this region. We don't believe that your location nor your ethnicity should be a determining factor of your health outcomes. Unfortunately, here in America, African Americans, and that's our primary focus. We care about all people, but because of the story of what's happened to us of African descent here in this republic, there are just these overwhelming health disparities that exist. Think about this. Do you know someone who's African American that has diabetes? Or do you know someone who's African American that has hypertension? Do you know someone who's African American that suffers from heart disease or asthma? And probably the answer is yes. And so these health disparities, what they do is they erode the quality of life for people, and they actually shorten it, right? So there's a 10 to 12 year gap in terms of life expectancy for if you're African American and live in certain communities, and then if you're white and live in other communities. And so we don't believe that that's the kind of society that we should live in. One of the things that we focus on is the social determinants of health. The social determinants of health, the lived environment, are really what impact your health outcomes. And for us at the Buffalo Center for Health Equity, we focus on, or we have identified 5 areas that definitely we need to address in order to change or to bring health equity. If we don't do these things, then we're just talking about doing something that will never happen. One of those things is education. We know that your education level is a great predictor of your economic stability or upward mobility. We know that in the Buffalo Public Schools, and not only Buffalo Public, but in the charters and other, African American children are struggling many grade levels behind in reading. And that's going to make it very difficult for these children to succeed moving forward if they're struggling. 2, employment. The unemployment rate in the African American community is still twice that of the white community. But also, not only unemployment, but underemployment. We have many people who are struggling economically, who actually work every single day, but they're not obtaining the kind of wages that will allow for them to live a more comfortable life. And there are ways in which we could change that by access to training and transportation and other things. Another area is food access. We've talked a lot about over the years about, and we don't use this term food desert because a desert is a natural phenomenon. But the fact that there's not enough venues for people to get healthy food is an act of man, of humans. And so we've used the term food apartheid. And so by not having access to healthy food, nor having the ability to afford healthy food is more expensive than unhealthy food, then that's going to impact your health outcomes. Access to primary care. We know that if you have a primary care physician and a good relationship, an active relationship with that primary care physician, then your health outcomes will improve. And then the 5th factor is housing. We know that if you look at the work and study of Dr. Henry Louis Taylor in The Harder We Run, we know that on the east side of Buffalo, there is an absolute housing crisis where many people are living in substandard housing and paying exorbitant amount of rent or their income on rent. And this, again, contributes to poor health outcomes. And so those 5 things are things that, and you can't eliminate, you can't ignore one. They all have to be addressed, and they're connected to one another. Your income is connected to your housing ability. Your education is connected to your income. So it's all kind of related. And we need to build a beloved community. We need to make sure that every person in our community has access to living with a child getting a great education, living in a good home, and having a good job. And they're organizations that have historically worked very, very hard and very effectively on addressing some of those issues. And I want to focus on today around the issue of housing. There's an organization called People United for Sustainable Housing that has been operating for 20 years in the city of Buffalo. And if you go in certain neighborhoods on the west side of Buffalo, you'll see actual fruits of their work in terms of the construction and the redevelopment, the rehabbing of places for people in those communities to be able to obtain or have that safe, affordable housing. And not only do they have done those, but they've been great advocates for policy changes that impact, the housing, the ability for people to live in quality, affordable housing. And so today we're joined by Janaea Capers. And Janaea is a new graduate of the University of Buffalo, graduating just a few years ago with a degree in sociology, which is once my undergraduate degree, and has found herself working in a position of organizing for housing justice at PUSH, People United for Sustainable Housing. And she's here to talk to us today about one of the planks that Partnership for Public Good, who we collaborate with, and Sarah Wooten is here with us as well. And on that plank, and it was a great process, and if you haven't had an opportunity to participate in it, you should. A very democratic process where many community organizers and activists and other advocates come together and talk about what are we going to prioritize in this community. What are we really going to get behind? And one of those planks was good cause eviction protections. The city of Buffalo and its common council have an opportunity to send a powerful message to those who are having challenges with quality affordable housing and to implement an opt-in good cause eviction policy, which provides legal protections against unfair evictions and exorbitant rent increases. And so, Janaea, I'm going to have you just talk a little bit about, why that is so important for citizens, our friends, our neighbors, to have this kind of protection around not being evicted unjustly. And then we'll have you chime in as well, Sarah. But welcome into the space, Janaea.
To start off by saying that we believe that no one should lose their homes for no reason. Good cause eviction protections ensures that landlords can't evict tenants or impose huge rent hikes without a valid reason, like not paying rent, like a valid reason. So you can't evict someone without a good cause, we say. So a good cause would be not paying your rent or violating the lease. Like that is a good cause or a good reason. This policy keeps families stable and prevents unjust displacement and strengthens our communities by balancing the rights of renters and property owners, right? In a city like Buffalo, where housing insecurity is growing crisis and evictions is one of the highest in upstate New York and even rivals some boroughs in New York City, we believe that's the reason why we believe good cause eviction should be passed here in Buffalo.
So you thought, so if there's a good cause, there's got to be a bad cause.
Yes.
So what are some of the things that you're hearing from people that, because we want to, this is not like a theory, right? Mm-hmm. We know that in real time, people are being evicted from their properties, families sometimes. And so what are some of the things, the rationales you're hearing from folks that would not fall in that category of good cause?
I would say that it's what who wouldn't fall in a reason for a good cause. So I would say it's a right and a wrong way to evict someone. You have an illegal and a legal route. So sometimes we see what we say unjust eviction. So sometimes the landlord just says get out of your house, and just because they don't want you to live anywhere, that's not a just eviction, right? Sometimes we see someone who, or sometimes they just want to increase the rent. Right now, it's no cap on rent, so your landlord can increase your rent by 500. that's not a reason for someone to get out. But say if the landlord wants to take back their property for like personal use, that's like according to the law, like that's a good or a just reason, right? Or say if the tenant destroys a property, right? That's a reason for you to evict someone. So those are like some of the reasons that we see happen. Or even now, say like we are on the west side of Buffalo, and that right now it's getting right now you can see a lot of businesses is coming there, and then the west side of Buffalo is getting like heavily gentrified, so they're trying to like increase rent prices and kick people out. And so that's the reason, like they're not even fixing the houses in the west side, but they want to raise the rent prices because they see new things coming. And so that's not a proper reason for you to kick someone out.
So Sarah, I'd like to welcome you into the space. Sarah comes to us from the Partnership for Public Good, who does some great research and organizing work, and we at the Buffalo Center for Health Equity work in community and collaboration with them on many, many issues. So Sarah, help us, get an even deeper, and thank you, Janae, that give us even a deeper understanding of the scope of this problem. Because someone may be viewing this and say, well, if I own a property and a person, and I want them to leave my property, I have a right to that, right? So what does the law say? What are we seeing? Why is it important? I want us to kind of zero in on why it's important that the city council passes this kind of an ordinance, and how does that relate to already existing tenant rights?
Yeah, so unfortunately, right now in the city of Buffalo, tenants don't have a whole lot of rights when it comes to your landlord coming to you and saying, I want you to leave within the next 30 or 60 days or whatever the case is. Landlords have to provide some level of notice depending on how long you've lived there. But outside of that, they can ask you to leave unless you have a lease. A lot of people, maybe they had a 1-year lease and now it's month to month after that year passed, or maybe they never had, a written lease and it's effectively a month to month lease. In that case, yeah, the landlord can ask you to leave pretty much at any time, unfortunately. And a lot of people do, they're not going to necessarily wait for the eviction filing to even happen. And so it's difficult to even know how many of these forced moves are occurring because Janaea talks about this all the time. The data that we have is from the court. And so those are when the eviction filings are happening if somebody refuses to leave. But how many families are just leaving when their landlord asks them to leave for no good reason, right? And I really appreciated the context that you provided at the beginning, Pastor, about all of the different elements of people's lives that we need to focus on improving these inequities. And I think housing speaks to so many of those. We've seen from national research that forced moves increase the likelihood that someone will lose their job. If they have to move away to a new neighborhood where they can't reach their job as easily, or they had to go visit several different apartments and had to take time off of work, and maybe they lost their job for that reason. Kids, miss a lot of school when they are forced to move. People just end up having worse healthcare or worse access to their healthcare. In the state of New Jersey, they've had actively the protections of good for decades, actually. And so there, you might imagine that landlords have a very different conception of their rights because they're used to, continuing the tenancy unless the tenant is breaking one of these rules. Yeah, so I think that's really important to know, is that we would not be the first. And in fact, in the state of New York, we wouldn't be the first either. Many cities have did it.
What does it look like? Our neighbor.
Women are more likely to get evicted. Women with children are more likely to get evicted. And if you actually break it down to like racially speaking, 67% of like African American women, yeah, are more likely to get evicted, and then like
so let me stop you there. So 67% of the folks that are being evicted in the city of Buffalo, or is it national?
Buffalo.
City
like
of Buffalo.
Yeah, like Erie County, Buffalo.
All right. 67% of those folks are Black women.
Mm-hmm.
And of that percentage of Black women, how many of them have children? Do
Um,
we know that?
I don't have the exact number of which
So
one.
we could guess that it would be a pretty high number, right?
Yes.
Right. So what we're saying, so what you're saying is we have single mothers of color
Hmm.
who are struggling to find safe, affordable housing. They secure some semblance of that. So now, they could be living in a place that's not safe and affordable. But we'll give people the benefit of the doubt for this conversation. And 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 they're experiencing high rates of eviction.
Hmm.
And so we're simply asking the city council, right,
Yeah.
to provide some protection to single mothers who face a higher rate of eviction. So would that be a safe statement?
Yes, it is.
So what would be the rationale not to do that? Just from a human side. So jump in. So the issue, the way our society is structured is very bizarre in a lot of ways. And in some people believe, like, that housing is a human right,
Hmm.
right? So while I understand the reality of people's different economic experience, but we have to live in a society, or I think we should seek to live in a society where if or everybody has shelter, right? And especially women with a child, right? So there should be no scenario where where it's okay, appropriate to put a woman with a child and put her in a situation where she has no shelter.
And I will also add too that they're most likely living in uninhabitable housing. Like we know because we've been fighting for this law called proactive renters inspection that most of our houses here in Buffalo are uninhabitable too. So not only are you more likely to get evicted, but you're more likely to live in houses that are unsafe and unhealthy. So now you're getting hit from both ends, and then we know you actually our homeless populations too. Like um Black and brown people are more likely to, once they get evicted, they're more likely to be homeless too. So like you're getting hit at all ends, and like you talked about food, apartheid too. Like this is everything that's affecting our communities right now, and they're all connected.
So so Sarah, if I'm correct, uh, housing court
Mhm.
has not really been functioning in a very real way in a couple of years now, right? Is that true?
Yeah, I would say with housing court, there are a lot of ways that it could be improved. We'd really like to see more kind of communication between the cases that are about the quality of housing and the tenants who live in them. So many years ago, I believe it was the case in Buffalo City Housing Court, where if you had a conditions case where the landlord was being brought to court because they weren't taking care of these repairs, that then that judge was in communication with the folks who were handling any evictions cases. And we don't necessarily see that happening today because,
Why? There's reasons, right? It's okay. I mean,
I guess off the record.
No, I mean, you can give an opinion. Why? Let me reframe it. Why do you think that?
I think that it just hasn't been the focus. I think when somebody comes into housing court as a judge and they see all these connections and they're passionate about kind of structuring the court in a way to get those repairs done, minimize evictions in cases where the repairs need to be done, and just really thinking about things holistically, I think people have been able to make it happen. But maybe there have been other focuses in housing court more
Like what?
recently.
What would those other focuses be? If we're not focused on single mothers with children who need shelter.
Yeah.
And so what would be the point of even having a housing court if 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 one of the main priorities of a housing court would be to make sure that a single mother with a child is taken care of?
Yeah. I mean, I guess, very much protecting property rights, essentially, as far as.
So property rights more important than the rights of a child?
Yeah, I think personally, like the court doesn't function to protect the individuals, and even right now, we don't have any policies to get representations. Like we have, like landlords, they are able to have like their own lawyers and housing court. But then like individual who goes into housing court, they don't have any representation, and that's why it's been a fight to get like right to counsel for individuals to get counsel into housing court because like, you're representing yourself.
So let me get this straight. I need to understand this with clarity. So you're saying in housing court, a landlord or property owner can have legal counsel.
Mm-hmm.
And a person that is facing eviction,
well, in Buffalo,
if they can afford it.
In Buffalo, we do have quite a bit of protection. With the legal aid services, there's a few of them. I think Center for Elder Law and Justice, Neighborhood Legal Services, and Legal Aid Bureau, I believe, are the three. They all work together to provide representation.
How big is their caseload?
Big.
Big. Like I said earlier, Buffalo, we have the highest evictions in upstate New York. So they're very overwhelmed right now, and then they don't intervene unless you already have eviction notice. And so about that time, you have 30 days. Like it's too late. So a lot of people there already have to.
So they have representation, but it's really not a fair fight.
Short. Yeah, and also this is kind of at the goodwill of those organizations and their ability to fund themselves to do that. There's no state law that says that we have to have protections for those folks. So ideally,
do any of these big law firms that get like big contracts from like the government, do they ever go pro bono?
Legal Aid Bureau, or not legal, Volunteer Lawyers Project. I don't know how it all works now. At one point, it used to be that like folks would volunteer but I don't know the intricacies of it. But
I think it's important for the public to understand, right, how serious this is, right?
Yeah.
And so let me shift a little bit. I mean, it's related to this. So the notion of a property that's substandard or has violations, unsafe. Let's use that word, unsafe. Aren't there supposed to be safeguards that make sure that these properties are safe? And so I know that the plank number 5, we're talking about proactive inspections. Tell me what let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, proactive renters inspections was the law that was passed in 2020 to make sure that your house is inspected for things such as lead and minimal safe and health standards. We saw that they wasn't doing it. Like they were supposed to inspect.
Who's supposed to do it?
So the city, the city passed this law, and they were supposed to inspect 6,000 houses annually.
Okay.
And we found between 2020 and 2022, they inspected less than 6,000. And so
how many were they supposed to?
6,000.
And so how many? Do we know the real number? I mean, less than 6,000 could be 5,900.
So it was it was like around like 5,000.
5,000 over the course of 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah. So
it's not great, but it's not bad. Right?
It was bad in the sense of this law is set up so that you're supposed to be inspecting all of the houses on a 3-year cycle. So the 6,000 was for the first 6-year rollout, but after that, it's supposed to happen every 3 years that all of these homes are inspected. And at the rate that they were doing it, all of the houses wouldn't be inspected until like 21 years or something like that had passed. So there's no way for them to cycle through quickly if you're taking 20 years to get done with doing the first inspection.
So what's the consequence of this not happening?
Well, we tried to sue the city. That was the consequences because we went to the council because the one that passed the law, but overall, the mayor, because the Department of Inspections is the one who um the inspections department is the one who like actually go out and inspect them. The mayor oversees that department. So we try to see like if they can actually implement it. Um Initially we had some, they thought that they were doing everything in their job and they said it was nothing wrong initially. But then after a lot of pushback from the media and stuff like that, they finally admitted that it was a problem and they're not doing the job to their fully capacity. And then we filed a lawsuit, but then the lawsuit got uh, it was dismissed. Yeah.
We do plan to appeal. And one other thing I'd say in response to that question is, you know, prior to the proactive rental inspections law, the idea was that if you have a problem as a tenant, you're supposed to call 311 and have an inspector come out and do the inspection. Well, the problem with that is, I mean, one, tenants shouldn't have to do that. The property should be up to code. But two, that a lot of tenants are afraid to do that because, without good cause, they can be asked to leave with very little notice and not really have recourse around it. So the idea with this was to make it an automatic process such that, we didn't have to ask tenants to put themselves on the line to report out some kind of issue, that the inspectors would automatically be doing this. And so I think part of the result of the city not doing this is that tenants are still having to kind of speak out when there's an issue if they feel like they're able to. But, one of the tenants who was a part of the lawsuit, she had this great quote. I can't remember exactly what it was, but, she had spoken up about issues in her property and, had some retaliation as a result from her landlord. And she had a quote that was like, I understand now why people sit in their house with mold, because to speak out is to, put you and your children at risk in terms of further risk in terms of being forced out.
So when I talk about consequences, you guys gave me the legal consequences. So what's the health consequence for a person who, let's stay with our women with children living in a house dwelling that is filled with lead or mold, or what's the consequence there?
Yeah, I can even say personally, like even I have like a lot of like asthma. I have asthma and allergies, and just like growing up in a house that's like uninhabitable, like that affects like my asthma and like allergies. And like I remember having to stay home from school just because like if a house like has like I'm allergic to mold, right? So if I have a house living in a house that has mold in it, like then I'm severely sick, and then that leaves that we had to move like several times because living in a house that's uninhabitable. And sometimes when you move into a house, you don't realize how bad it is until you're actually in a house. And sometimes people don't realize about like sometimes you believe that like you are the cause of a problem, but you're really not. Like a lot of folks believe that like, oh, I have a mouse in my house, but it's not you. Like your house can be completely clean, but you have a foundation problem. They just keep getting in because of the hose, right? Or like roaches. You might just have a roof leak, like a water leak. Roaches comes from like water leak.
Yeah.
So a lot of times you can be the cleanest person, but you can just have these issues. So like in good cause, proactive renters inspection, it looks for like roof leaks. It looks for the foundation of your house, and that can prevent and look at like a lot of these like simple like these issues that I'm talking about. So you can probably prevent mouses, which a lot of people would say like, oh, you have a mouse issue. That's a county thing. But it could be the foundation of your house, and that can be a 2-for-1 thing, right?
Yeah. So we know right now in the local public schools, only about 20% of Black children are reading at grade level. So what would you say is the connection of a child growing up, in a home that they're being they're exposed to lead or other diseases that mice and roaches and other vermin that they carry diseases with them, right? And then the issues around asthma and the high rates of asthma, which was one of the pre-existing conditions of COVID, right? So that would make you more susceptible to COVID. So so can you help me understand or articulate the connection between health outcomes, short-term and long-term health issues, and this housing, these housing issues?
Yeah, I even know like in PPG they wrote, which everyone should be read about, like evicted in Buffalo. They wrote about how like 16% of children are like who are evicted are likely to have like these issues, like whether in school or like health outcomes, right? And so like if like I said, like if you're at home, are you sick, you're missing school, you're going to have these issues just from being evicted, or say that can be like from being evicted, or say you also have issues too from living in uninhabitable houses. Like the same things also apply. So if I'm either at home sick because um if I'm at home sick because I like either can't breathe and I'm missing school, then I'm not going to be able to have like the same amount of education like as my peers, right? And I think that that's an issue that we need to talk about and discuss, is like why the reason why some kids are behind is either they are in a condition that they either like, oh, they're falling asleep in class because they can't sleep at home, or they are missing school because they're either at home sick, or they can't focus because there's just a
Right.
lot of other things going
No,
on.
you're right on point. You're right on point. And so, Sarah, let me ask you a question, because sometimes when I'm in conversations with people in different levels of government, sometimes the city blames the county, county blames the city. It's just like, what do we do? So how do we get all four branches of our government, federal, state, city, county, um, to work together? Like this is not a controversial issue, right? This is not.
Shouldn't be.
No, I mean, come on. And there are real world consequences for the most vulnerable of us in our community. And if you look at it economically, one of the problems that's really going to bankrupt the United States of America is our healthcare costs. People don't realize this, right? And that's like one of the biggest threats to our country are these overwhelming healthcare costs. And one of the reasons why the healthcare costs are so high is because we have these pockets of population, and oftentimes these are people of African American, Latino, oftentimes poor, all these other things, who are so incredibly sick, right? And need so much care that easily many of their chronic diseases could have been prevented. So what's the great thing about, or the thing you understand about chronic disease? Like, you don't have to have asthma. You don't have to have diabetes. You don't have to have hypertension. You don't have to have these things, right? And even when they first begin to present, there are things that you can do, right? By changing environment and changing behavior, but changing behavior is often connected to the ability to change environment, right? You can't tell people, oh, you just got to go out and exercise, and they don't have walkable sidewalks or access to gyms, right? And so there's so this whole thing, and so oftentimes the government will say, well, yeah, this is all great, but we can't afford to do these inspections. But that's so short-sighted, because if you don't do these things, then the consequence will be that you'll have a sicker population that will require a greater expense to care for. And newsflash, these folks are not going to have like private insurance. So Medicaid and Medicare and all these other stuff, because one of the good things that about our country is if you're sick and you go to a hospital, they have to take care of you, which is good. right? And so, but there's a cost. And if a person has had private insurance, they don't have whatever, the cost is borne by all of us, right? So there is a moral imperative to do the things that we're talking about. And, of course, I think the moral imperative should be primary, but there's also an economic imperative, right? Because if we don't start fixing these things, they're just going to get worse and they're going to get more costly. So we're going to put people out in the street, no housing. They got to go somewhere, right? And it's got to be paid for, right? And so help me understand, or let's give some recommendations or encouragements on some of the things that we're asking. So PPG did these planks; they were excellent. We're talking about two of them today, about eviction, fair, a good cause eviction, and proactive renter inspections. So who needs to move this from the paper to action? Who are we looking for to really, let's get this thing going? Because with this, we can fix this. This is doable.
Yeah, so I think you make so many great points as far as, where we should start in terms of thinking about what we need to do now and then how that will impact things moving forward and benefit us long term. And I think, each of these planks is kind of targeted toward a different person or group of people. So with good cause, it's very much the city council that would need to opt into it. So we've been in conversations with lots of council folks about that. With proactive rental inspections, the council passed it unanimously back in 2020. And I would say the majority of them that we've talked to are still very much on board with this and want this to happen. And it's really the executives side of the city of Buffalo that needs to enact it and needs to, there's the commissioner of the Department of Inspections. And so ideally, I guess the executive working with that commissioner to see what are your plans for implementing this? Do we have enough in the budget? Do we need to add more? What does this look like? I mean, we see examples of the city of Rochester and Monroe County working together very closely on getting this done. Like they come to the table, frequently and work together, and they're all kind of on board with this.
So how much of the ARPA money was invested?
I don't know the exact numbers. It was mainly to pay for one person's role or a couple people's role. Now there's less. I don't know that ARPA is involved anymore.
Yeah, because the ARPA was funded for like 6 years total. And then it was discussions to extend the money out, which they prolong. Like we're trying to decide. Well, PRR was supposed to be like self-funding, but then it was also discussion like how are we going to fund it. Yeah. Last year we also did fight to get like $1 million into the budget because it was discussions of
$1 million.
Yeah, $1 million, right?
I can't remember. Well, because I can't remember the budget asked because they had put additional positions into the budget, and then it wasn't entirely clear, how much more was being, because proactive rental inspections is a part of the permits and inspections budget. So it's unclear how much money is going to that directly. They were saying they were going to hire additional people for proactive rental inspections, and that's part of the problem now is it's unclear whether they've actually hired those people.
Why
or
is it
whether
unclear? It's not. So of course, and we'll wrap it up, but of course, I think the big pushback is going to be money. You got to afford to do this, right?
Well,
so
part of it is money, but part of it isn't. I think a big part of it is will and how things are done. So
if it's not money, then tell me what the other
So back when the city of Buffalo was first putting this together, they met with folks in Rochester. The folks from Buffalo's inspection office went to the Rochester inspections and they said, how are you guys doing this? And they had really interesting ways of doing things. They have like little in their office, in their Rochester inspections office, they have little pods of desks. And it's folks who are, inspectors who've been there for a long time paired with newer folks. And so that's how they orient their office to be able to kind of share knowledge better. They also have iPads. So in Buffalo right now, there's no iPads. So the inspectors, they go out, they do the inspection, they come back to the office and they type everything up. So how much time does that take when you're doing that back and forth where you could actually be doing inspections and be taking the notes as you go? But of course, there's I get the sense that there might be pushback from the inspections department, from some inspectors who have been doing it this way, their whole careers. And do you really want to switch everything over? But if we need to do that, we need to do that, and we have to figure out the way. But it's not clear that the commissioner right now is committed to.
So we have children that are living in dwellings that they're exposed to, all kinds of things in their air and their water, exposed to vermin, exposed to disease carrying vermin, and we're concerned on whether or not somebody's comfortable about using an iPad on a job that they're getting paid to do. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So folks, we got work to do. So let me, as we close, Janae and Sarah, what would you want people to do? So people who are going to watch this, they're going to say, okay, this sounds terrible. It is. So how can they change this, right? So what would you, if someone were to say to you, okay, Janae, I'm with you, I hear what you're saying, what would you want me to do in order to help us change this situation?
Yes, I will say get involved. Like if you are able to, and you want to spread the word. Like we have a power hour every second Tuesday of the month from 6 to 8 p.m. And that's how you can hear more and learn a little bit more about this law. And so that's how we go out and we can door knock, we canvas, we do all of these things so we can spread the word of this law
So
more.
how people get in contact with us?
So they can go to our Instagram, Push Buffalo. They can find my email. They can contact me, Janaea at pushbuffalo.org. And they can also reach out and contact their council members to tell them to pass this law too, because the council members always say that they hear from the other side, the landlords, and those are the ones that are telling them not to pass this law, and they need people, their constituents, to tell them to pass this law. Or they hear about other things, but they need people to reach out to them and be like, hey, I think this is a good law and pass this. So we need more people to be spreading this word and saying hey, I actually really want this law, and we need more people to help us and to try to fight for this too. And we actually have a petition going around for you guys to sign it to show your support for this, which is also on our Instagram.
Sarah, what do you think? What else? How, this is 2025 is going to be a year of action. We could talk about all these things. All these points are great. We need to talk about them. Now it's what are we going to do?
Yeah, we do plan to appeal the lawsuit decision. And so as soon as we have that appeal ready, I think we'll be doing some kind of public event press conference around that. So folks are able to come out. Look to our Facebook page, PPG Buffalo's Facebook page, probably pushes social media as well. We'll be spreading the word when that's set up. Also similarly calling your council members, letting them know how important proactive rental inspections are to you, because even though many of them are on board, they can always use the extra push to be saying, keep pushing on the commissioner to make this happen. I think those are the main things that are coming to mind right now.
Great. Well, we appreciate you coming and sharing this very, very important information with us. You've been listening to the Igniting Hope podcast. Today we've just had a great conversation with Janaea Capers from People United for Stability in Housing, Push Buffalo, and also joined by Sarah Wooten from the Partnership for Public Good, PPG. And one of the things that I would offer that needs to happen is, and we're being very intentional about that here at the Buffalo Center for Health Equity. And if you want more information about the Buffalo Center for Health Equity, go on to our website, buffalohealthequity.org, buffalohealthequity.org. And is we have to work together. So one of the things you're going to see in this space here on our podcast is highlighting and creating spaces and platforms for our partner organizations, agencies, and friends. Because the only way that we'll be able to make change is if the PPGs, the Pushes, and Open Buffalo, and the Urban League, and see all these organizations, we have to work together collaboratively, right? Not episodically, not in a transactional type of thing when there's a grant or something, but we have to really forge, meaningful relationships and connections and a shared vision on what we believe this community should look like, right? And then we need to bring our forces together, right? And have be very strategic in how we bring forth change, right? And so I'm excited about the work that Push is doing. I'm excited about the work that PPG is doing, and we at the Buffalo Center for Health Equity and our team, we stand in solidarity with you, and we want to whatever we can do to help. We want to do that, right? And I would invite and encourage all these different groups and organizations and stuff. We got a whole bunch of folks doing stuff, and I honor those who are out there working. But let me just say this: we can get a lot more done if we work together, man. Right? I mean, that's some stuff we got to own, right? Um, we know what those who are opposing change and stuff. We know what they're doing, right? So we don't have to dwell on that, right? And I think we're in a season right now where we got to focus on what we are going to do and what we're going to do together. So I'm encouraged, and I thank you for taking the time to listen to our Igniting Hope podcast. We'll be back at you soon, but please, if you have any questions or want more information about good cause eviction protections and the proactive renters and inspection process, two of the planks were, how many planks were there that got
10.
approved? 10 planks that got approved at our community gathering. It was a very democratic and inspiring session. Please reach out to the Buffalo Center for Health Equity, buffalohealthequity.org, or go on and look at Partnership for the Public Good, or look up Push Buffalo. I don't have to, I'm not going to do the work for you. Just Google. Things are so easy. So, I cancel all this notion about, oh, I didn't know I could find you or whatever. Man, these phones make it so sometimes you just have to. If you play this podcast near your phone, it will begin to start. Won't it? It'll begin to start generating websites and places for you to go without even asking.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So not knowing is not an excuse anymore. So let's get this thing together. Let's work together, and let's bring real change for those who desperately need change to happen in their community. So I'm Pastor George Nicholas, and I thank you. We love you. Everything that we do with the Buffalo Center for Health Equity is absolutely motivated by our love for you and our love for humanity. So we thank you for taking the time for being with us.